Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today's block is Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. We're up to right before the Mishnah. Right before this is Tuesday's Gemara. Tomorrow's Gemara. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah said that if the woman was kidnapped based on because of money, then we assume nothing really happened, and she's committed to her husband. But if it's because of Foshas, and right now we take the Mishnah literally that she's the one who's sentenced to death, then there's problems. She can't go after her husband, even let's say she was given clemency. However, the Gemara says that in Foshas Surah Rav says Rav, right above the Mishnah, we're talking about that the husband was the one who was sentenced to death on account of stealing. And their wives, therefore, are also maltreated. The Levi says no, the wife of a Ganef is not really maltreated to that extent. It's talking about Ishta Shel Ben Dunoi, the wife of Ben Dunoi, whose real name was Elazar, and he was sentenced to death because he was a murderer, and then his wife is maltreated. Abused. Chizki says only if they were already given the final sentence that he was to be put to death, only then, regardless of Geneva or Tzich, or the reason is, but as long as he's sentenced to put to death, that's when they start maltreating her, not before the sentence. Rabbi Yochanan says, they didn't issue the sentence yet. Being tried already, then they take advantage of her. So the Mishnah Ira said he should keep Shua Charkum, a city that was surrounded by a garrison, or was taken over by a garrison. All the women there that are kahanas, actually doesn't mean the women are kohen. They're married to a kohen. If they're married to a kohen and she was even raped by somebody, she's also the husband. Psulas, they are forbidden. And the truth of the matter is, even if they, what do you call it? It's not so much, even if it's not the question of rape, which Rashi learns. It's just the fact that with a goy makes her already, even if she's a single girl, if you had a relation with a goy, she's usher to a kohen. But if there are witnesses that nothing untoward happened, I feel ever that a slave or a maid had the money, even though generally disqualified, the witnesses here they believe. But they themselves testify that they are Torah is not good enough. That's the question. It says, if an army garrison came into a city and they go through the city and they rampage the city, Bishar Shalom, which is a time of peace. We already had this Gemara as well. What do you call? We had it before. If Bishas, what do you call it? Bishar Shalom is a time of peace. If it's a time of peace, then chavi is psucher. Any open barrel asuras are forbidden. Stum is mutadas. If they're sealed, they are permitted because they won't really tamper with it. But b'shas muhammad. But when it's a time of war, elu mutadas. They have no time to go ahead. But worry about yain nesachit. If the goyim tampered with the wine, it's like stam yain, you don't drink it. So if it's a time of peace, they'll open, all the open bottle barrels, they'll take it. They have no problem taking it for themselves, even though it's not theirs. But if they're sealed, they're not going to bother. However, if it's a time of war, they don't have time to go ahead and to tamper with the wine. They have more important things on their mind. They have no time to go ahead and be menaseh. So the question is, so the same thing with women. Why are you worried about the women there? Says you're comparing women to wine. For the women, they have time to rape the women. But to go ahead and pour the wine for Avodah, that they don't have time for. Even though in logic you would think the other way around, that they need all the help they can get if they're idol worshippers. They're going to do whatever they need to make sure they win the war. But because they already took over the city, so they feel a bit more confident, and then they're worried about the wine, but they'll rape the women. He says no, it depends. Here we're talking about becharkum shaloisa malchus. If it's a local kingdom, the army, and kam becharkum has another country that's taking over. And Machlek is showing him how to learn exactly more answer. Rashi says if it's a local government that I guess the country, their own army that's now took back the city, they're not going to harm their own citizens. So everything's all right. It's only if it's outsiders they're going to go and rape the women. And Teisel is exactly the opposite. If it's a local government, then they feel confident that they took back their city and they're not worried anymore. They have plenty of time to go rape the women. If the foreign government, they're constantly worried that they'll be taken over again, so they're more interested in strategies and in ensuring their safety, rather than going out there and pillaging the city and the people. Even their own kingdom, the question, even if it's their own army, you're going to guarantee the loy order chad benai. You tell me it's their own army, no problem. What do you mean? Only is one soldier there, one renegade soldier running around and raping women causes already a problem. That any woman that he raped cannot go back to can I go live with a coin? Says the Gemara. So they can all see each other, so therefore they make sure that nothing happens. So nobody can go around and harm the people in the city. So is it possible to say, is that so secure? Is it impossible that the guards fall asleep, those over the middle of the night? They surrounded the city. Even though it's according to Rashi, even though it's a local government soldier, they're still outside the city, not inside the city. So they surround the city with chains, kalba dogs, and gavs, and all kinds of pegs and spikes for avza and geese. And therefore, if anybody tries to go into the city in the middle of the night, they'll make noise and the soldiers will wake up. So nobody's going to brave to do that. One of them gave the same answer we just said right now. Depends if it's a local army or foreign army, and will cash limit. He's not concerned about these questions he asked. Oh, one person not worried about. The Chad Kash the Kolhani, the other one actually asked all the questions that we went through, and he answered exactly what we answered. That you surrounded the city with your shelter, chains, the kalba dogs, gavza, and spikes for avza and geese, and therefore there's no noises. There's no concern that somebody's going to break into the city at night. Interesting, if you have one cave in the city, Matzelis al Hakahanas Kul. We have one cave in the city that every single Baskayan can say that they were in that cave, and it's good enough. Machlek is whether they actually have to say it or not, or we just make that assumption. Big Machlek is showing we're talking about a very large cave that can contain everybody, or even a small cave that cannot. What happens if the cave is so small that only one person can fit in? Do we say do we say that each person, that's the person that was saved? We don't say. We don't say that that's the person that was saved. In logic, they're showing want to know if it's only one person that can be saved. What do you mean that the whole city, all the women there are saved because one person could have hidden and the army couldn't get to her? So someone answer because by a people we don't say batal b'roiv. By a barrier we don't say batal b'roiv. Or other ones say it's like kavua. And kol kavua we had before is kemech samech above. And because they're fixed in the cave, and every woman was in the cave, we don't know which one it is. Therefore, it's a suffix. And by in this case, because you don't know for sure anything really happened, it becomes l'kula. Says the Gemara, Ma'ishna house ain't different from a case that we learned in Psachim of Mishnei Shevilin. There were two. What happens? There were two roads to get somewhere. Echad tameh v'echad. One of them had a body lying across. That means anybody walked over there would have become tameh, and the other one didn't. And two people, each one walked on a different road. One of them is tameh, but we don't know which one. The Holabachman, he went to one that was satara. He touched some taharas. The other one came, and he went and touched other food. Now the question is, and he touched tahara. The question is, which one is tameh and which one isn't? Rabbi Yehuda says, "Im nishel ze bifnei atzmei v'ze bifnei." If each one came independent of the other one and asked his questions, each one's a suffix, and we have a rule that a suffix tumah in a shusarabim is tari. But they both came at the same time. There's no rub that can paskin that both tari, because definitely one of them is tummy. So you're gonna have to say that the tara is a tummy. We're asking a question regarding the food that they touch rather than people themselves, because regarding the people themselves, the Taisa says they should go to the mikveh and fix themselves up. And because in the future they might both touch the same food, and that food definitely will come tummy. So regarding themselves, everyone holds that they have to do something to fix it up. The question is regarding the food they already touched, what happens? So Rabbi Yehuda says, if they come different separate times, we're going to be mekel. Rabbi Yossi says, benkach or benkach tameh. Rabbi Yossi says, no, even they come separately, they are tameh. Now the Gemara tries to understand. Each one is a suffix. Suffix tumah in a shusar rabim is tahir. Why are we saying it that even each one comes independent of the other, they become tameh? Says Rabbi, let me qualify this argument. They both came at the same time. Everyone says the Rav has to say tameh because the food is tameh, because definitely, one of them is tameh. And he established Nisa. If it's one after another succession, each one's a suffix to Rabbi Mister. Know they're arguing about the bo lishoil olov the al chaveri. One person comes, Reuben comes and asks about himself and also about his colleague Shimon, who went through the other road. So he's asking about himself, but he's talking. So he's here on his own, but he's talking about both. One of them says, well, this is like coming at the same time. Even though there's only one person there, he's talking about two people. The other one says, no, since he's talking about himself he's the only one here, and the other person is not here. It's as if they're two separate times, and therefore it's each one he can pass Torah. Now, I'm here too. Keeping the shot since you tell me that all the women in the city are Torah, you're making one psak. It's like they all came at the same time. And because they all came at the same time, so we learned before that, and Allah is like Rabbi Yossi. If you ask about yourself and your friend, it's considered as if it's all one time, and you definitely, since there's definitely tumah there, you have to say tumah. So here also, how can you pass that all the women in the city are tumah? Since we don't know which one, one of them is Torah, the rest of them are tumah. We don't know which one. So you're asking about everybody, the whole city. So we should pass tumah because definitely somebody's tumah. So the Gemara, how do you compare the two? Over there, in that case, one of the roads definitely were tameh. So you can't just say tar. All we know is the garrison was in the city. Do we know for a fact that they raped any women? Not at all. We're just making a supposition. And therefore, in this case here, we could be lenient and say that they're all tired. Even Rabbi Yossi would be murdered. Boy, Rabbi has a question. She said, she came forward, she incriminated herself. She said, look, I definitely was not in that cave, but I always want you to know that nothing ever happened to me. This is like Pesha Asa, Pesha Hita. Do we say, Mala the Shaka? Do we say there's a migui? There's a miga here, and it's not so much. It's a degree less than pesha asa because we know the majority of women couldn't fit into the cave. So, but nevertheless, she has a miga. She could have said, "I was in the cave." Mala the shaka. Why would I lie? So therefore, she must be telling the truth. Or maybe in this case, we don't say mala the shaka because you know that most women couldn't fit in. So it's like, and not only that, since we know for sure that if she didn't go in there, she was raped. The moment she said that I wasn't hiding in the cave, then we know that then it's as if we're standing there taking testimony that she was definitely raped because she didn't go into the cave. And therefore it's a miga against witnesses, and a miga against witnesses doesn't hold up. A miga is not stronger, not more convincing than two witnesses saying that this is what happened. You can have a miga from today or tomorrow, but these are the facts. And this is a fact that the army was loose in the city and you were free in the city, not hiding, probably you were raped. So it's a migi against Adam. That's what the Gemara thinks. So the Gemara then continues. Why should this be different than Mahum Maisa? Gemara says, well, let's compare it to another story of migi against Adam. It was a story that gave a person he rented out, he hired out his donkey to a friend in Amalek. He gave him a warning. Like Tezel Ba'ucha den Hapkoi, don't go along the river of Nahapkoi. Dika Maya, there's plenty of water there. Zil Ba'ucha, the Norash, go through the city of Norash. It's dry land, it's safer for the donkey. The Lekamai, there's no water. He went down the road in the Hapkoid, and the donkey died. He actually went the wrong way. He didn't listen to instructions, and the donkey died. Yes, I'll agree. And no one knows which way he went. He said, yes, I definitely went via the Hapkoid. I was told not to, but I want you to know, it was dry. There was a drought, whatever. There was no water there. It didn't die from water, it died from heat stroke, whatever. It did not die from drowning. Amar Rav says, well, Mala the Shakti has a miga. He could have said he went down the other way through Norash. And instead, he said he went but he went the other way through Nahapkoi. He's telling, so he incriminated himself. He could have said he went the other way and be free. So now that he incriminated himself, but he told us the story, he has a miga. Abaye says, no, this is a miga, which is against Adam. The Adam say that what? There's always water there. And at the moment he admits that he went through Nahapkoi, then we don't believe him that there was no water there because we're sure that there was water there. It's a miga against Adam, and Allah is like a baya. You cannot have a miga against Adam. So the same thing over here. Even if she says that she wasn't in the cave, we're Adam that something happened to her untoward, and therefore her miga doesn't help. And the reason why Rav holds that over here that he is believed is because it's not 100% there's always water there. Usually there's water there, but sometimes there isn't. So maybe this miga defines that this is one of those cases. Anyway, so what do you compare the case of the donkey to our case here? There, it's almost 100% sure that there was water there. You can say for a fact if she was not hiding in a cave that the soldiers raped her. It's only a concern. But a miga against a concern, yes, is valid. Says the Mishnah, the witnesses, I feel even a slave, I feel shifcha and a maid, and they believe. I feel shifcha, even a maid, even her maid who usually remains, will always defend her, is believed. A maid is believed, even though it's qualified aid, it's her maid. She's always tell us, help out her mistress. Is believed. So is that really so? But I mean, that's a question. I'll show you that sometimes maids are not believed because we don't believe them. We don't trust them. We think that she's constantly trying to defend her mistress, and if you can't trust them, what's the story? It says, We're talking about a person who's dying, and he wants his wife not to be stuck if he dies. He doesn't want his wife to be stuck with his brother and have to have a chalitza or yibum, so on and so forth. So he writes her a get, and he writes a get on the condition that if he dies, this get should be retrospective. And then we say that from the moment he wrote the get, they should not be alone in seclusion alone, because maybe they would have a relationship. And if they do have a relationship after you wrote the get, it becomes an old get. And it becomes an old get, which means that let's say she falls pregnant and she has a child, and they'll see that the age of the child and the date of the get, they'll think that the kid was born outside of wedlock, and he'll be stained. He'll be stained forever. So therefore, like Yachani do not have any union together, be alone together. LLP Aiden, always have witnesses there. But not her own maid, because her own maid will see them have a relation. She won't say a word. She is not worried about having relations with her husband in front of her maid, because the maid won't say a word. So therefore, if you don't trust the maid, you won't say a word. How can you trust over here now, Mishnah? If she says that she didn't become tamei, we trust her. How can we trust her? So we have a few answers. The puppy says, the puppy says that over here we do trust her maid, because the whole thing is a chash anyway, an assumption. So therefore we're lenient. The puppy says, no, we don't trust her maid. The Mishnah says we trust the maid, but it's his maid, but not her maid. Her maid, who is subservient to her, is not going to tell us that if she was raped by the soldiers. So therefore we can't trust her. How can you say her maid not believe? It says, ain't other maid a person cannot testify by themselves on themselves. That's the only limitation is about yourself. It seems to be, but her maid, Mehemna would be believed. Says her maid is so subservient to her mistress, it's as if she is the mistress. And because she is as if she is the mistress, cannot be trusted. So Papi holds her maid could be trusted, because Papa, his brother, says cannot be trusted at all. Ravashi comes along and says, no, the maid can be trusted. But why? A shivcha will keep quiet and not say anything, even though it's a lie. And no, if she sees if her mistress is in isolation with her husband after he wrote that conditional get, and her relations, all she has to do is be quiet and not say they had relations. That she'll do. Be quiet. Over there, all she has to do is be quiet, and that will enable this woman to rely on that get. She's not going to say a word. Over here, if she doesn't say something, we're going to assume automatically that she was raped by the soldiers. The only way that she'll get out of it is the maid has to actually get up, proactively lie, not just be quiet, proactively lie and say, no, nobody raped her, even though she saw that she was. Is mehemna so what do you call it? But here, because you have to lie, that far she's not going to go, and therefore she can be trusted. Therefore, she can be trusted in our case here. And we are going to, and that's the difference. The difference if the lie is barely being quiet, or the lie is actually getting up there and saying something. Says the Gemara, what's the difference? If you accuse her of lying, then what's the difference if she keeps quiet or if she says something? Says the Gemara, Tartila Avra. This is like two things. This is like two steps. Being quiet is one step. Not saying anything. Not saying that your mistress had a relation. It was alone with her husband and had a relation. But to go out there and lie is like two steps. Keeping quiet and then actually saying that she was not raped, but she was. That far she is not going to go. Says the Gemara. Like the story, the mother Barisik, I'm the other say Barisik, also Bechazoi, suddenly he was about to inherit his father. Suddenly along came a long lost brother from far away from Chazoi and said, I'm your brother. In other words, you knew you had a brother who was very young and left with your father. I'm your brother. Many years later, give me my share of the estate. I'm like, I don't recognize you. Also, the comment of yes, what this Morbid said, he's not lying. The Chesiv said, Yosef recognized his brother, but they didn't recognize him because he was very young, didn't have a beard or anything. When he left home, 17 years old, he did not have a beard. So now he did. They didn't recognize him. Now he had a beard. So the brother said, "Zil Isis." Morbid said, "Zil Isis, Ahmed, go bring me proof that you're my brother, and then we'll divide the estate." Amalei, he said to Rabchizi, Isli Sadi, I have witnesses, but they're scared of this guy. The Gavra Almud, but this is a very strong person, very influential, and they're scared of him. And the way Tesla and Pshat is that he actually had to bring the witnesses who say that we have what to say, but we're not going to say anything because we're scared. Amalei the day, so Mary said turn around to Rav Chiza turned around to Mary, but he said, Zil, I see you prove that he's not your brother. And Tosfos actually says that Rav Chiza says to Mary, he said, talk to these two witnesses and get them to testify that this is not his brother, because they're saying that these two witnesses say that he is his brother, and they don't want to say anything. So you get these two witnesses to say that he's not his brother. Amalei said to him, Dina, what kind of din is this? I have to prove he's not my brother. He has to prove that he is my brother. This is how we judge cases like you, where people are very strong and other people are intimidated by you. So now the question is, what's the point? If he's a strong armed person, then he'll get false witnesses, or he'll get these witnesses to lie and say, yes, he's not his brother. Tati Lovdi, they're going to be quiet when they're called in to say testimony, this is his brother, they're going to be quiet, they're not going to say anything. Quiet, silence is easy. They plead the fifth. It's when they have to lie and say that this guy is not your brother, when in fact he is, that far they're not going to go. That's the proof. Let's say, in fact, regarding the maid is a machlekes tonight. It says, Zu ages ish isha, the following are ages for a man or woman. That following ages, a man or woman, like little kids, her father and mother, brother, and her sister. So the question, so we're going to say there's an argument two prices whether maid is believed or not believed. Talking about now, if somebody was kidnapped, everyone is kosher to say that nothing happened, nothing untoward happened to her and the captors, even little children, even her father and mother, generally are not accepted. Brother and sister, not her son, and not her daughter, and loy not a servant and not her maid. So it's clear from here. It's clear from here what that a maid is not to be believed. The Tanya learned elsewhere. Everyone's believed to testify except herself or and her husband. So it seems to me only she and her husband, because her husband each take a goof with like one and the same. But a maid is believed. Contradiction. So that our puppy that I've asked you tonight, that puppy that I've asked you both who say that a maid, even her maid, is believed. There's no question. There's a machlekes of two rices, whether she's believed or not. That our papa says there's a difference, that her maid is not believed. His maid is believed. Mi lema tanoyi. Are they actually arguing, or can we say that one of them is talking about his maid, one of them is about her maid? Papa said, I can give you another answer. I could say, no, it's talking about her maid, but she wasn't giving us testimony because then we wouldn't trust her. She just stopped talking and telling us a story. She's just chatting away. Rab Chanan was telling us that a story came from a story came for Rebbe, but a person stop telling the story. They said, I and my mother were both kidnapped. You're just telling the story. We're both kidnapped. Taken captive. When I went to draw water, yet I was constantly watching my mother. I had to go chop wood and collect wood. I was thinking about, I was watching my mother. In other words, nothing happened to her. Just telling the story, how what kind of devoted son he is. They say that Rebbe relied on that to marry her off to even a kohen. Mishnah. Chaim Katz said he was a kohen. I swear in the base of Mikdash, is regarding his wife, even though we were taken captive. Sorry, not taken captive, but we were taken over by these soldiers. I never let my wife go from my hand. From the moment that the goyim came to the shleim, till they left. In other words, I'm testifying that my wife is tired, and I'm a kohen. I can continue living with her. I said to him, sorry, ain't other maid al atzma. Your own wife is you are all one and the same. You cannot testify on your behalf. You need other witnesses. Said what Tommy learned. Very sad story. So he watched his wife the whole time, but because the soldiers were there, they and maybe this is Rashi's proof that foreigners, we assume that bad things happen because these are the Romans who came to Islam. They were foreign legions, and that's why we suspect that they did something wrong, something to her. So look what happened. Alpha PK, nevertheless. Because they were a family with kids and everything else, he gave her a house in his courtyard, but they're not allowed having a yichud because he's not allowed to live, if she was raped or can't live with her. So what happens as follows: the children were always with them. If she ever went out with her kids, first she went out, then her kids behind her. So she was never alone in the courtyard with her ex-husband. When she came back home, first the kids came in, then she followed, so he was never a yichud. Boya is asked, can a kohen who divorced his wife and he's not allowed to take her back, and they both live in the same courtyard or not? Or Hassan would over there, we allowed them to live together because really we don't know if anything really happened, and maybe they're permitted to each other. So we were lenient. But in the case of a grusha where the Torah clearly says you cannot take your wife back. So therefore, maybe we should not allow them to live in the same courtyard. A demolition makes no difference. Time we learned if somebody divorces his wife, like you should not you should not allow her to live and so on while you live in the same neighborhood. Taisha says a neighborhood is made up of 3 houses, and also because they're living near each other, they know each other, and who knows, something can strike up again. We're here. We're talking about we're talking about if you're divorced, Yisrael, and your wife wants to got remarried, and you shouldn't allow her to be in your courtyard because who knows what can happen there. But if he was a kohen, so even if she did not get remarried, a kohen cannot take his own wife back, even though she did not get remarried, because once she's divorced, he can't take her back. Here we're even more chomer, even more machmer, and that is that not only in the shchuda, which is 3 houses, but the entire street, you cannot live very close to each other. What about a small village? There's an argument here whether a kvar cotton is larger than a mother or not. Happened, and there's 2 versions of the Gemara here. One version is that kvar cotton is like a shchuna, and therefore it's like very, very close. It's forbidden even for Yisrael. The other gifts that the Bach brings down is kvar cotton is like a mother. It's only forbidden for a kohen, not for Yisrael. So the question, okay, who has to leave the neighborhood? The husband and ex-wife, they divorced. And who has to leave that shchuna, that little neighborhood? The husband or the wife? Toshba coming here. The time we learn, he needs to if she gets displaced, she has to move away. Then he does not have to move away. He stays there and she moved away. But if she owned a courtyard there, then he has to relocate. I don't know what's going on here. What happened if both owned the house there? Who has to leave for who? Toshba coming here. It says that she has to leave before him. What's the case? He owns the house, then she doesn't. What's the question? Of course she has to leave. She owns the house. Well, if she owns the house, then he has to leave. Then he has to leave. Isn't it talking about if you say that she has to leave and there's a chiddush involved, they both own a house there, in that case she has to leave. No proof. Maybe he owns the house but she's renting, and because she's renting, therefore she has to leave. My havila, bottom line, what's it then? If they both own a house there, who has to leave for who? Toshba coming here. Interesting. It says in the pasuk, Hine Hashem, the Eibishter, the Shai is reprimanding these. He says, Hashem metaltalecha metaltala gever. The Eibishter will make you wander about like the wandering of a male. And why is that? For a male to be homeless is far worse than for a female. To moving about and wandering about, I guess because a woman gets married, she moves into the man's house. Or they used to be definitely moved into the man's house, let's say, in those days. So therefore, she's used to moving. On the other hand, the man was born and died in the same house, possibly. So they're not used to moving. So what we learned. Love him, and if she borrowed from him, if she borrowed, let's say, from him, let's say the look she brought in and she lent him some money, and now she wants to collect back after the divorce, she shouldn't be going to her ex-husband, to let's say it's a kohen, to try to get back the money because they're being seclusion, and who knows, something might flare up again. If she comes to a din Torah, just she and her, there's certain intimacy goes on in Torah, it's only those two. We don't want that they should strike up a relationship again because it's a kohen and his wife. We also put him in chayrim for him coming to court. Put them both in chayrim. And we actually give him malchus as well. In fact, we do all 3. We learned in a Masechta called Eivod Rabasi, which in our Gemara is called Smachs. In the back of Avodah Zarah, it says that it talks about that a person is a goyis, is still a living being. Now, a murder him, so it's still a living being, even though you won't get punished for murder if you kill him. But otherwise, in every other respect, he's a living person. When are talking about when they divorce men of sin? When are we worried about if they divorce from the sin? We don't want them to be alone together. If they only got engaged and nothing more than that, so they don't really have a relationship really, then she can go ahead and collect the money. They don't have that kind of relationship that's going to flare up again because they were never that close. They only got engaged. They were never married. The words of the story. Who others about two versions of the story. It was this others and Rosasa, this couple that were engaged. Also, kind of give her other. They had some kind of a dintator. Yossi Ravada Master Kamei. Ravada Master sat there. Uki Rabba Shlucha bin Tay. Rabba set up an intermediary between the two. They shouldn't be alone. I'm the Master Varam Nachra Bachman said they're only engaged. You don't have to worry. Tana be'ever Rabasi. That we're not worried they're only engaged. Amalei Kochazina. I can see the Kogaisi Badodi. I can see that they're very close to each other. Ikadamini, and therefore in this case over here, I don't want them to flare up. Ikadam, another version is it wasn't Rabba said it all the way around. Look, Uki Rabba Shlicha B'Tai. Rabba did not set a shliach. They just came in on their own. I want you to have a person in between them. So Rabba said back to defend himself. And Ahmed said, that they're immediately engaged, don't worry. So he said back to Rabba, they're not too close to each other. We can see, look how they're so close. The guys they're close to each other. Okay, this